Hi everyone, welcome back to my top 500 games. At number 103 we have Spyro the Dragon, and this is a game that I'm not entirely sure how I found out about it. It may have been through my friend Matthew, but saying that, I know that we both got this game at the same time because I got it for Christmas and he got it for that same Christmas. So I don't remember exactly what year it was sometime in the late 90s. But I got this game for Christmas and I had a lot of fun with it. And I remember later on in that Christmas day, we went to my grandma's house as we usually did over Christmas. And, we'd have our Christmas dinner there. And I remember begging my mum to get home because I was desperate to play this game and I was so bored. Going to Grandma's house was one of the later of the day Christmas traditions that we had, and so I do remember going there and this particular time just being really, really fed up. I remember just laying there and I got to the point where I didn't want to be rude because I was never like a rude kid, but I just remember saying to my mum, I was like, "Mum, please can we go home now? Please, I want to go home. I'm so bored." And I just really, really started fed up and I really wanted to go home and play Spyro, and so when I got home I did play Spyro. And I remember a few days afterwards my friend Matthew came over and I would say that I got Spyro the Dragon and he would say, well, I do too. And I told him I was up to, I believe it was the Beastmaker's world, and then he told me that he was further than me, and I was like, whoa, you're further than me? Because I realised the mistake that I made when playing through this game the first time, and that is that I didn't spend too much attention on the different collectibles. Because the way that this game works with the collectibles, I'll explain that in a minute, but the best way I can describe this game is that it's a 3D platformer, but what makes it unique is that Spyro can glide. You've got a few abilities such as gliding, which will allow you to traverse high areas, and it also allowed the level design to be rather open, with big fields and stuff, and this was also accommodated for by the fact that one of your attacks was to charge. So you could charge, you could also breathe fire, and you had different enemies with different setups that were either strong or weak to different types of attacks. So for example, large enemies, if you charged into them it wouldn't hurt them, but also you had enemies that wore fire protective armor, so you had to either charge them, or if you had big ones with your armor you had to sort of find a point of their body where there wasn't any armor and breathe fire on that bit. But each zone is divided into several different levels. So for example, you'll have the Artisan's World, which is the first world, and then inside that you will have all these different gateways that lead to different levels. Each level will have a set amount of dragons that you have to free, a set amount of treasure that you have to collect, and a set amount of dragon eggs that you have to save from these thieves. And the way that you progress through this game is by collecting whatever the balloonist wants you to collect, and they will allow you to get to the next world. So for example, in order to go to the second world, you will need to save so many dragons, and then in order to get to the third world, you'll need to collect so much treasure, and so on and so forth. And the different thing that you need each time will mean that you should always focus on just getting as much as you want. But this is where I originally made my mistake, because I originally focused primarily just on the gathering of whatever it was I needed to get to the next world. So for example, in the first world, I never really concerned myself over the treasure because I didn't think to myself, oh, I'm going to need treasure later on. Whereas you see my friend Matthew, what he did is he just focused on everything at once, so he managed to get a lot more than I did, and so that's how he did better than me first time through. In each world you will also have a boss, but bosses aren't really like big events in this game. It's kind of just an extra variation on a type of level. And you'll also have these extra flying levels where you can fly around and you have to collect 10 of these things, where it might be fly through 10 gates and destroy 10 barrels and all that type of thing. What I do remember really liking about this game was just how treasure itself was permanent, and this is something that really stood out to me at the time. Each gem that you collect is there once and then it's gone forever. So if you go into a level and then you collect like some gems and leave, those gems you collected, they count as you having had collected them, so they will never respawn. And that level of consistency to me seemed like such a weird and amazing thing, because it was like the game has to keep track of all these things, of each individual gem that you've collected. I really did find that interesting, and the game is really, really focused on collecting these things. So for example, you will find these points in each level which is like the return home spot. So you can kind of view it as sort of like being the end of the level, apart from it really doesn't make any difference because you don't get anything just for getting to the end, and you can quit a level at any time. So I don't really know what the point is of them being there. But I think perhaps the big thing about this game that I do remember is the extra secret bonus level, because if you manage to collect everything in the game, that's all of the treasure, free all of the dragon net, and get all of the dragon eggs back, you will unlock the extra final level called Nasty's Loot, and it doesn't really serve any purpose other than to supply you with loads of extra gems which don't do anything. But as much as people I've heard say in the past that it's very unimpressive how this level is set out, I just think the sheer fact that there is this level with all of this money in it, or rather all these gems in it, all over the place, I think that in and of itself is interesting. I also remember being stuck trying to get the full collection because I think I was missing like one gem throughout the entire game, and it was like on Lofty Towers in the Dreamweaver's world. And I remember looking all over the level for it for ages, and I remember eventually finally finding this one little gem just hidden away and then collecting it and then leaving. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet, which I probably should mention as well, is that your health is determined by a dragonfly called Sparks, and the colour of the dragonfly will determine how much health you have left. And if the dragonfly dies, then that leaves a bit of a problem, because to collect gems the dragonfly will sometimes hit the gems and knock them into you, but if you lose all of your health apart from that last one, then you won't have that. And also, if something would drop a gem, collected the gem from the thing that it would drop this little white orb instead, and collecting so many of those white orbs would give you an extra life. And I just love this game with how vast the levels are, and yet how intricate the level design can still be given that. And you've got all the little hidden secret areas that require you to glide in certain ways. It's very interesting and I love it. At number 102, we have MotorStorm Apocalypse. And some of the things I said about MotorStorm Pacific Rift kind of apply here. It still does the whole thing about having a turbo engine and water cooling it down faster, so you can have puddles that will help you speed up, or levels where it's raining means you can charge up even further. So all that's good. Although I did play this one before Pacific Rift, and my experience of this game, my first-hand experience, as in my first impressions of this game, was, I will say, very positive. Really what's interesting is that there aren't too much in terms of mechanics to talk about. It's just that I feel that straight right off the bat there was that level of intensity there that I really liked. So you start the game and the game starts off and you are basically launched onto this beach, and just instantly you are doing a race. And the race itself is tense. There's lots of things flying all over the place, which is really just for spectacle for the most part. And you're having to be very careful not to crash into things, which I know sounds like a very typical racing game thing, but I find that with this game in particular, you really have to keep your eye on the environment and on the cars to know the exact timing of when to turn and all that. But when you get to the end of this race and the title screen pops up, I just thought, wow, like that is a very good introduction. I am really hyped for playing this game now, although I kind of understood and I kind of had this feeling that that sort of level of hype would be short-lived, if you know what I mean. It wasn't like an RPG where I can look through menus and think, oh, look at all this stuff I'm going to eventually do. It's kind of that other extreme where it's kind of like, wow, that thing that just happened was amazing, I want to have more of that amazing thing happen again. But the main gimmick of this game, or the main theme of this game, is that it's the apocalypse. So the world is basically ending as you're racing. You will be racing around and it'll probably be storming, there'll probably be lots of winds around, and in some cases you've got all these buildings that are collapsing, and you've got buildings that collapse around you, roads tearing apart, all sorts of stuff, which may in a way sound like it is purely for spectacle, and a lot of it is, but what this also means is that the race can change throughout several different laps. So for example, you could do one lap, and then by the time you're in the middle of the second lap, one of the roads that you're on kind of tears apart a bit, so you then have that jump that you have to make, and it's all very good. There is also this extra feature where you can collect these cards, so that's sort of like a bonus side activity for you to do, I suppose. But the thing is that what I find makes it interesting but also very hard as well is that there's so much stuff going on that it's so hard to see these cards just like around. Like, you know, there'll be buildings blowing away, roads collapsing, just all sorts, rubble flying everywhere, and you're supposed to collect these little cards flying around in the level. I have seen a few of them, but I've collected very few. There's meant to be like 5 a level or so, and so they must be very well hidden. At number 101, we have Fallout 3. And I've talked about a few of these Bethesda open world big RPGs before, and here is another one, this one being a Fallout game, not an Elder Scrolls game. And I definitely prefer this game to those other two. What I will say, and I want to get this completely out of the way first, everything that I've mentioned about Skyrim and Oblivion, about the fact that I don't like role-playing, I don't like story branches, I don't like talking to NPCs to change the story, and all that sort of stuff. All of that stuff is still here, it still fully applies, and I still don't like that at all. However, I really, really feel that Fallout 3 has a much more gamey feel to it. I don't know if that's the right terminology or what the right terminology would be, but I generally feel that this game has an extra element of strategy to it that the previous games I mentioned didn't. I actually remember I got this game for Christmas of 2008, apart from it was one of those games that I played for a little bit before then, because basically this is what happened, okay? I asked my dad for Fallout 3 for Christmas, and what's funny is that I bought the game before Christmas because I got it for my friend Josh as a Christmas present. So I got it as a Christmas present for someone else, and then someone else got it as a Christmas present for me. But because I owned a copy, I had a copy in my possession before giving it away for Christmas, I was a bit cheeky and I played the game before. So yep, there's that. I played it for a little bit before Christmas, but I got it for Christmas. And what I really, really did like about this game was I really liked the idea of how the perks worked. I really, really liked looking through the instruction manual and looking at the different perks that you could get at different levels. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, well, that perk is good, but it's kind of overridden by this other perk which does this other thing, and this perk will work well, but of course it means that I'm going to be losing out on this thing. And I always say, and I always mean it as well, that I really, really hate it when games do a sort of permanent loss thing, where you choosing one thing means that you can never get the other, and so you have to make this permanent decision. I don't like that. I like it where I know that no matter how far back I fall, I can always reach the top. And honestly, I generally prefer it if games do have these large scale punishments where you can be knocked down a lot if you do something wrong. I really do like that, but just this idea of doing a wrong thing and having a wrong thing happen is something that really is what puts me off games like this and just Bethesda RPGs in general. But I really, really did enjoy this system a lot more. And what it also meant was that leveling up in and of itself was a sort of a big event. I liked that idea of selecting things and weighing options against each other and trying to find the optimal route. That was really nice. Another thing that made me like this a lot more than the Elder Scrolls games is that first-person shooting is just a lot better than first-person sword swinging. I mean, it just is. And also the VATS system where you can freeze the game to select different body parts adds a little bit more of a tactical advantage to the gameplay style, even if not by that much. I think people really overemphasize that, but yeah, it does add a little bit of tactics involved as opposed to twitchy first-person shooting. And so it was just a nice, nice game. 400 games. I have talked about, described, given my stories with 400 games. That's a lot of games. And yet, I still haven't talked about the games in my top 100. But after several hours worth of talking about the first 400 games of my top 500, this is it. We are here. This is the final stretch. Hello everyone, welcome to my top 100 games. It's time to get serious. You may remember the story about how I once went to my granddad's house and I played on his PlayStation. I played a demo of Jumping Flash, I played a demo of Battle Arena Toshinden, and I also played Ridge Racer there as well. Well, there was one other demo that I played there, and this game also was the first game that I played on this PlayStation when he eventually gave it to me. And so this was the very first 3D, proper 3D game that I played at my own house on a console that I owned. This is a game that, looking back, people tend to not like as much, but at the time was a great hit. Although saying that, the character of this game, or rather should I say, this game series, is one that people have been wanting to see a proper continuation of for years. And although not so prevalent as much as he was, this character was a really, really big PlayStation mascot. If you can't tell what game I'm talking about, number 100 is Crash Bandicoot. I remember playing this demo, and the demo is of Jungle Rollers, the second level. And during this demo, there is a bit where you see a shiny green platform, and if you jump on it, it will take you up to where there are a few extra lives. Now, when I eventually did get this game, I noticed that this gem wasn't there. It was shrunk down into a tiny gem that disappeared when you went close to it, and I didn't understand what that was all about. And it didn't really hit me for a while. I just played through the series of levels as you come to them. I remember talking to my friend Matthew about how he suspected that the other two islands in the background would be islands that you would go to after the first one. I didn't think so, but he was right, because once you've completed all the first set of levels on the first island, you then go to the second island, and after those, you go to the third island, which is the final island. And so this game, whilst being 3D, doesn't really use a wide open three-dimensional level design, really, because it's all based on straightforward passages. Like, you go straight forward down the level, or it might be straight downwards if you're running away from a boulder or something like that. And there are 2D-esque levels where you are going from left to right, such as the native fortress type levels. It wasn't until much later, however, where I discovered that you can get gems through these levels, and this is something that I did not know about at all throughout my playthrough of the original first game. It was only until playing later games in the series that I really knew that gems were a thing, but I didn't know they were a thing in this first game. And also, I didn't have a memory card back then as well, so I had to progress through passwords, and you unlock the password / save the game by, in a level, collecting 3 Torna icons, and then getting to the end of the bonus stage, and you'll be given a password or an opportunity to save your game. I also noticed along the way through my first completion of this game that there are extra levels along the path. There's 2 extra levels that you can't go to, and I didn't know how you were meant to, but I eventually found out that if you collect all the Neocortex icons in a level, you will get sent to a Cortex bonus stage, and by completing that, you will get a key. Now, those are hard to get, and they're also very missable as well, because a lot of the Cortex icons that you will find are from rather tricky areas that you would have to do very specific maneuvers that you would only have like one shot at. So you might have one that's in the air, but you need to jump on a box to be able to reach it, but of course jumping on the box will smash the box, and it's quite hidden away, or you'll need to make sure that you jump on an enemy at the right time to go along this certain path, so it would be missable per playthrough of a level, basically. But there was only 2 levels that had the 3 Neocortex icons in them. There was also the Embryo bonus stages, which don't do anything. I guess they're just there to get lives and stuff. But I eventually found out that you could get the gems by smashing all of the boxes in a level through 1 life, and you can get an alternative ending, because the second last level, the Great Hall, is a very small level with just 1 jump that at first confused me, but if you get all the gems, you can follow this different path that will lead you to an alternate ending. Now, some levels you can't get all of the boxes because some of them are in areas that you can't reach without the corresponding coloured gem to use as platforms, and the way that you get the coloured gems is just by collecting the gem on the level that corresponds with that gem, that colour. The game doesn't inform you of this, but some levels, when you get the gem at the end of the level, it will be of a particular colour, and that will unlock different gem platforms in several other levels, so you will have to backtrack to previous levels once you've got a particular coloured gem to be able to reach the other boxes. And that's why in the demo the gem platform was there, but in the proper game it isn't there to begin with, you have to unlock it. And I have 2 stories pertaining to this game that I have very strong memories of, one of them in fact being a lot more recent than the other. The first big memory I have, and I know this would have been sometime in the 90s because this was when I was in the bedroom that I had at that time, but there was one time where I had this watch that was really, really annoying. It had buttons on it which were very hard to press, and it was also set with an alarm on, and the snooze was active, so every so often, I think it was like every hour or so, it would just go beep 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 beep, and I couldn't sleep throughout that night. And I remember I got to a point where I just woke up in the middle of the night and I was just like, forget it, I'm not sleeping. And so I turned on my PlayStation and I played Crash Bandicoot throughout the rest of the night. And this is such a strong memory for me because this is the first time I ever remember being awake whilst it was night and the sun came out and I saw it getting gradually lighter outside. So this is a very big memory for me. It was also really annoying because I remember I wanted to sleep and I was also on the toxic wastes level, which is one that people, I think, tend to underestimate. I think people think that slippery climb is the hardest, but I think toxic wastes is. Toxic wastes is, if I can speak properly. Another big memory about this game comes from 2013, so yeah, that's a lot later. But during this time around 2013, I really got into listening to the Crash Bandicoot soundtrack. It was something that I just decided to do, and what's interesting is that on lastfm.com, or rather last.fm, whatever it is, for a while, I don't know if this has changed, but I became the #1 listener for the Crash Bandicoot soundtrack, which means I listen to that soundtrack more than anybody else on Last.fm. But the soundtrack itself is something that you don't often see these days. What I really liked about it was that it's very simple music and it incorporates nature sounds and different sounds from different things in its music. So, for example, in the Great Wall / Native Fortress type levels, you'll have people chanting, like tribal chants, and then in other nature-based levels, you'll hear like birds and stuff as part of the music. And I really like that, and it's rather atmospheric music, and I would like to see more games do that.